Okay, good morning everyone. My name is James Henderson and I am going to be, for the next 45 minutes, attempting to take you through the Friday Fundamental on kind of an introduction to SoftList. SoftList is one of the most powerful modules within SoftPlan because it allows you to generate a complete bill of materials of your given project, whether you're doing a full custom home or whether you're doing a small remodel. This will give you a very accurate list of materials for your given project. However, one of the things that you're going to need to do is you need to treat your drawing then like a database. And that's where we as designers and architects and builders, we sometimes get ourselves into trouble that way because we shortcut the drawing. Something simple such as, these cabinets that you see on my floor plan. If you draw those in with lines, you should expect nothing back on the bill of materials because, after all, a line does not represent a cabinet. And so it really comes down to accuracy of drawings in order to get an accurate bill of materials. And what I'd like to do at this point is just take you through quickly what SoftPlan and SoftList are expecting for the BIM model. Okay, and if you draw towards the bill of materials, you can rest assured that your three-dimensional model and your elevations and your cross-sections are also going to be accurate. Okay, so as I'm taking a look at this floor plan, it's probably common sense for most of you right off the bat. I mean, you draw walls with walls. As I zoom in, an opening should be dimensioned to its accurate size, okay, so that you can show it on the elevation. But something is that might elude you, as I say, would be things like cabinetry, making sure that you have taken the time to draw in, the cabinets that you're going to use. And if you do that, in addition to actually getting the cabinet listed, you will have things like countertop and hardware, and you can assign other non-drawable items such as fasteners, etc., to that object. Okay, so everything that you draw within SoftPlan that is an object is going to have a SoftList tab. And that SoftList tab, when you click on it, would then allow you to go in and determine whether or not that item is going to be included in SoftList for listing out at a later time. So, once again, some of the more obvious things would be symbols, such as the refrigerator and the stove. Even drawing the commode or the toilet in there are all going to be fairly obvious. I like to use the mode selector that's located in the status bar as almost a checklist of items. Now, in a full 4-day SoftList training course, we would take you through every one of these modes, and formulas would be written or modified for every one of these modes so you can clearly understand what the program is looking for. Today I'm just going to try and do a flyover of some of the ones that you'll want to reach for right away. Okay, so when I'm inside the mode selector, as I take this down with the mouse and I click on things like floor system, speccing out the joist accurately is once again going to allow you to determine an accurate cut list. SoftList already has a built-in algorithm on the cut list whereby it would go in and find shorter joists for you, for example, so that instead of having, arbitrarily, I'll just say, three 3-foot 2x10s, it would simply calculate out one 10-foot where you're going to cut it into 3 pieces. Okay, so that's if you take the time to lay your joists out, not only do you get a accurate drawing, but your bill of materials will then go in, run the algorithm to get your cut list correctly. So modifying or editing at this time these joists, okay, again, if I make the edits on this for spacing, for depth of joist, and even the type of material that is going to be used, whether it's solid lumber versus I-joist or floor trusses, okay, is going to allow SoftList to accurately report that, so that as I'm looking at this right now and as I'm sitting in the SoftList tab and I click just the list materials, okay, it's going to now go in and accurately calculate based on my floor plan what it is that I've got listed for the joist. And as I just stretch this left to right for a second, it calculates out my joist for me at this point. Okay, now in time we're going to generate a complete report of the entire project, but this just shows you that you can quickly go in and take a look at what SoftList sees when I edit this joist set down here. So just what's highlighted is now being listed here. Okay. Carrying on from that, other modes where you're going to, that sometimes are overlooked, if you will. Most of us go in and put the roof on, so that's pretty straightforward. If you get your roof, correct on the second floor plan in this case, okay, I can then have my roof framing added and even add collar ties in there, which is what I can see with the purple, line running, top to bottom there. That's going to list out accurately. But other places would include things like ceilings. If you take the time to put the ceiling, not only is it ceiling board and ceiling joist, but you'll have the ability to go in and edit items such as a ceiling board and have something like insulation as a simple checkbox. You can then list the depth of that, and we will be able to calculate the square footage of insulation, and in addition to that, allow ResCheck to go in and calculate the insulating value. So by accurately adding the ceiling board, you have access to all of this other information that's there. Something we will touch on from a modification process today, if I go back into my main floor plan and change into the area mode. Not only can area mode be used to just get the square footage of the house, okay, but we will use that to set up something like a framing labor calculation, whereby we're going to cost out the framing labor for the heated area of the house for square footage, and then we'll do an unheated area calculation as well. Okay, so that'll be something that we'll take a look at, within the program. So again, just using this as a checklist, the drawing mode to get, drawable items in there, the, roof mode, which I talked about, or the ceiling mode, which allows the insulation. Framing mode is one of those modes that we tend to just take for granted and bypass, okay, especially if you're not doing things like wall framing diagrams, etc. But if you take the time to go in and modify your framing settings or options within the plan, your framing, in other words, your stud count, will be accurate. By default, our options right now is simply to list all intersects with a flat, stud, and all corners are going to be an L. And if I zoom this up, I can see this, okay, as I look at it in plan. Unlike a simple calculation where just take linear footage divided by a factor and you get your stud count, which is something you might use in a simple spreadsheet, SoftList actually comes in and counts the studs based on your frame settings. And then what you can do in addition to that is once you get that count is assign a waste factor, because as we all know, not every stud is going to be usable. Okay, and have a accurate count where you would literally, if you needed to, could come in and count the studs one by one, put your percentage on, and you would get the same number. If you take the time to modify these framing options, your SoftList will be accurate. So, for example, if I come in and I just simply edit an individual wall right now, okay, so I'm just editing this one wall, and we can see right now that the form corner, up is actually, this wall is actually forming that corner. I can now come in and I can modify what I'm doing as far as how that corner is going to be framed. And certainly an L stud, which is 2 studs, is going to be different in count than if I were putting 4 studs in there. Now that might sound, trivial, but you add up the number of exterior corners in a given custom home, you can see how you could quickly fall short in your bill of materials, even with a waste factor, if you're not accurately going in and making and modifying these changes. Now I've done this on a single wall basis, and I'll do the same thing over here on the interior wall, as it comes up here and intersects with that, I could go in and even space out or change things like stud spacing if for some reason that needed to be modified and changed. And that's going to now move these to 12-inch studs. Again, making those changes to my drawing enables me to have a more accurate bill of materials. Default options can certainly be changed, where all corners are going to be changed to that 4 stud or solid stud or whatever we're doing. And the same thing, all intersecting walls could be modified, okay, globally as well. So making sure this is set up in your system options going forward will enable you to have that accurate bill of materials. So that's just one of those modes you may not think to reach for, okay, but could have a huge impact on the stick count at the end of the day. All right? So again, drawing, area, ceiling, floor system, and roof all tend to be modes that you'll want to look to make sure things are certainly set up. Now, lesser modes, if you will, at least off the top, that could include things like the interior mode, which gives you literally the lineal footage of baseboard or crown mold, okay, flooring types, etc. Expensive things and things you definitely want to have listed in there, okay. These are more thought of from a three-dimensional perspective, but if you take the time to put them in there, the bill of materials will be accurate as well. Once you have a floor plan set up, so in this case, this floor plan is set and where the wall heights are correct, etc., I will have today a basement plan going in there, okay? If you do crawl spaces, then it's, obviously just, a foundation plan with shorter walls and maybe a different construction type, etc. And if you do slab on grade, then you just don't have the foundation. You'll have simply the main floor and second floor. But what will be... what you'll need to do is once you have these plans set, much like what you do with the elevations or cross sections, etc., is you will want to come in and assemble those into the model. And whatever is assembled in the model is what the SoftList module is going to look to list as far as the bill of materials is concerned. So as I drag these in, I will drag them in the order that I want them to be calculated, in particular if I'm doing it on a per floor basis, okay, so that they are listed out. Once these are stacked in the model, I will then be able to go ahead and calculate the the complete bill of materials according to different configurations called material definitions. Now, if you're a remodeler, it's possible that there are going to be certain things in any one of these floor plans you don't want calculated. You only want the new model. Any object that you draw within SoftPlan, okay, if I come back and I edit this wall to the left-hand side, all right, and you see it highlighted, but anything that you draw within SoftPlan, you can remove from including in SoftList. And when I remove it from including in SoftList, it's at that stage no longer going to calculate it. It still shows up in your elevations and so on because you'll need to see that, but everything associated with that wall, from the brick count to the stud count that we had in there and the square footage of drywall and the mud and the paint and all that, is all going to be excluded at this point. So for those of you that are doing remodels where you have to draw at least a portion of the existing structure, for your permits, etc., that's how you're going to remove it prior to running the report. Okay. Now I'm going to leave this one in the include in SoftList, and what I'm going to do is once I have stacked the 3 floor plans in this case into the model, I'm going to generate a report. And so down here towards the bottom, I have a whole list of various reports that are available to me. Off the top, we have the by floor, which is straightforward enough. Okay, you're going to have the foundation plan, the main floor plan, the second floor plan, all listed on an individual basis, and there'll be a separate section that is, collective items, so to speak, from all 3 plans being listed, okay, as one group. All right. You will have the standard detailed, which is one that you're going to reach for a lot, which basically just goes through, calculates the entire model, and you get globally joists or studs or brick all being listed together, okay, and they're broken down. you'll have, the cut list, which is going to go in, and I referred to this a few minutes ago, which is going to run the algorithm that basically takes the sticks, okay, whether it's for floor joist, ceiling joist, or stud count, and it's going to run the count such that it will, optimize the lumber that is going to be used for your project. Okay, there are some copies in here, so the by floor and the sample by floor are the same one. In the manual, it basically, we want you to kind of practice, if you will, or make changes on the sample, and you always have the by floor, for example, to go back to as kind of the template from there. And I would recommend that in a typical setting, and we do this in the training class, you would probably make a copy of one of these as you learn to use SoftList, because you can always move formulas from one definition to another. Now, with my floor plan stacked, I'm going to come in for the first report and run the standard detailed. And so under the navigation menu on the left-hand side, I'm just going to double-click on this to get my report running. The initial dialog that I get up is basically asking me to select the report that is associated with the material definition. So what SoftList has in essence, and I will take you into this, is we have a material definition which stores all of your formulas that do the actual calculations. Okay, so they do the heavy lifting, so to speak. And then once those calculations have been done, the report controls the order that you see them or how they're going to be grouped. Okay, so you have a standard detailed report, which is, all framing will be grouped together. And you'll have a by floor report, which means we're going to group the framing on a floor by floor basis. All right. In this case, standard detailed will do what we're going to do, and typically I'm always going to use that default report style with this definition. And so I'm okay with that, and I'll click OK to begin the processing of the 3 floor plans. And so what you're going to see now is it's going through and doing the calculations at this stage. In a couple of seconds, you're going to begin to see some prompts that come up. And these prompts are basically either going to be warnings or asking for information. In the case of when it's a value prompt, which is what I see right now as it pertains to termite protection, where basically it's a yes/no. Do I want to calculate, for termite protection on the project? And so in this case, if I select no, it's going to, push past it. In the next prompt that comes up is going to ask whether or not I want to calculate a building permit. So in this case, I may say yes. And when I do that, it's going to prompt me for the cost of the building permit. Okay, so if I type in, let's say, $500, I will then have the option of saying keep value, okay, or I can simply press OK. If I do the keep value, it's going to, keep that as the value each time I run this report as it pertains to this project. Okay, so I will select OK on that and allow it to go. And I'm just going to select no, so I'm not entering in a bunch of costs for each one of these items that comes up, so we can get to kind of the generated report. While it's running this through, and we didn't get an error prompt, okay, but it's possible that during the drawing process of your project, you may wind up, let's say, spanning your joist 20 feet. And so at that stage, you may get a warning prompt that simply says, we couldn't find a cost associated with this length of lumber. Okay, and so at that stage, what you could do then is you can either accept it or you can cancel it and go and make the changes to your drawing. All right. Once we have generated the report at this point, you can see at this stage that everything is listed out. And as I said, this is the standard detail. So everything is going to be grouped together according to headings. And this has basically been put in the order of the NHB's chart of accounts. And so there's the building permit right off the top, the one that I answered yes to and began typing in the actual report itself. And as I begin to just simply scroll this down, you will see that I've got my material name. Some items will have a description in there. You control yourself what that description is going to say. You will have a quantity for each of these materials, and how this quantity is calculated will be 100% controlled by you. So in the case of a concrete slab, it's possible that you're going to have that listed as cubic yards and you want that as square footage. That is something you can define. Okay? The cost factors that you have listed here are, we put those in and they're based on national averages. And so from the perspective of that, you will control that. And you know, this is something you can manually input inside SoftList. You also have the ability to set up this to link to an external database and have the costs imported from there. Okay, so that's going to be entirely up to you. You will see for today that our markup is all set to 0 at this stage, so there's going to be no markup on any of the thing that we run a report. That's, you know, something that you can control on a material by material basis, or we could go in at the end of the project and tack on just to the total cost a percentage value. Okay. Labor at this stage, again, is controlled by you, and they're all set to 0. So at this stage right now, the labor is set up based on the quantity of how things are being calculated, and it would, you know, add to that total. In the case of the concrete slab, we may want to know, let's say, cubic yards of concrete, but again, we're going to calculate out the labor on a square footage basis. In that case, we would have a separate formula to list that out as 2 line items, because if we simply enter in labor here, it would be based on a cubic yard calculation. All right? And then you have your totals, your subtotal as it pertains to that, and as I scroll this down, you know, you'll see at this stage there's all of our roof framing. Okay, we get into, you know, various concrete, and finally into things like openings, until we get to the bottom of the list, which gives us a total for the materials that were used to draw this. All right, again, these costs put in there as you know, kind of a placeholder guide based on national averages at the time. So if I scroll this back up, okay, you will see this will update on the fly as far as being able to modify or edit this. And so I could come in, for example, and you know, on the concrete slab, which you know, I just keep going back to that one, but which is 12.9. Okay, if we added a markup of, you know, 2% on that. Okay, when we do that, it's going to, you know, calculate that total into this as opposed to when it was sitting at 0. Okay, and then we can go into the labor and we can factor in what a labor cost is going to be on that as well, and it's going to update that total, okay, as we go. Once you have modified or changed any of this, and you can change totals as well, because we didn't, you know, put any kind of a, so I'm going to come down here to the pre-cuts. I'll add, you know, a 5% markup on, you know, that, and the labor, the framing labor is actually calculated separately. But once you've gone in and you've modified or made changes to the generator report, you would then be able to go in and you would be able to save this out as something that could be opened. And so by simply picking File and Save As, I could then come in and type in, you know, I'll just put detailed report for now, and that would then be saved as something that can be reopened so that our changes are not lost. Any one of the reports that you run, you'll be able to export, and I'll get into that in just a minute, but let's go through and take a look at running the other reports. So we ran the standard detailed, and in this case now, if I double-click on the cut list, and I will again just select OK to the default, and I'm just going to let this run through, and any prompts I get this time, I'm just going to answer no to the standard cut list, so we can take a look at what we get. And so it's going through, and I'll say no. Okay, and the easiest way would be for me to scroll down here into the, as we get into, say, the roof framing, for example, would be one place, okay? And if I wanted to do a search for something, all right, so if I do a find, and in this case, I'll do a find for joist, okay? And as I do that, it's going to pull up or find under my floor framing all of my joists. But one of the things that you will notice here is that some of the names have an asterisk beside them. And what that asterisk does for you is it basically tells you that in this case here, in order to get the 2 by 10 by 12 listing, it went in and it ran that algorithm, if you will, to calculate or put multiple joists together in order to get that. So as I'm looking at the standard cut list at this stage, all right, and I come into cut list report, so I just want report and cut list, what it's going to list for me is under the floor joists, it will break down all of the pieces that it was using, if you will, piece 1 versus piece 2 in order to do those calculations. And so, as you're looking at the material list report, okay, under the floor joists, it's got the it's got the listing of the various materials, so all of my rafters, etc. And as I go into the cut list report, it's going to break down those individual rafters, okay, and even list what my waste is going to be. And again, this is something that you can print out, okay, in order to track where the various framing members are coming from. Okay, if I go back to the I'll go back to the standard detailed report. All right, and as I'm looking at, I'm going to scroll down here and just find, let's say, the 2x4 pre-cut B. Okay, when I click on this listing and I can see, 347 of these pre-cuts are being called out for. If I were to right-click on this item, so just simply right-click, and I pick the highlight entities, it's going to take me back to the floor plan and highlight, okay, where those items are being calculated from. Now, in the case of the pre-cuts, obviously it's everything as far as the wall is concerned on the second story and everything minus the garage on the first story. Okay, so again, just from the plan, if I right-click and highlight headers, it's going to take me back to the floor plan, and the headers across the front wall here is where my calculation is coming from, and the same thing on the second story. That's how this report came up with the 2 by 10, 8 foot, and that means the other headers are being, shown on the plan, okay, are being used in a different area. Now, when it comes to being able to utilize or have SoftList go to other accounting packages, okay, perhaps you're using something else, but anytime that you have saved a given report, you will be able to come in and export that report, okay. So simply by selecting File and Export, you will be able to export your given reports that you have generated to another accounting package, okay? And we have a list of them here, okay, that we fully integrate with. And if yours is not listed there, or you were just attempting to take it into, say, Microsoft Excel, okay, you would simply export it as a comma or, delimited format at the top here. And what that would do is it would basically take your report as it stands now, and it would allow you to import that into your given accounting package. Now, if you have experience in any way, shape, or form, okay, with using another accounting package, etc., you know that it's possible to have different names for materials in one report or one accounting package versus another. SoftList to, say, QuickBooks, okay? This would, how we called opening header in one might be called something different in the other. And what SoftList, and what I'm about to do is take you into the nuts and bolts, okay, the behind-the-scenes part of SoftList, so you can understand how things are seen or looked at. All right. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to go in and to the configuration part of SoftList. If I come in through File, and I will go to System Options, okay, and System Options. And I'm going to go into the SoftList configuration, and you'll see listed here under the configuration material definitions and report styles. Keep in mind, material definitions is where the formulas are actually written from. Okay, and once the material definition has calculated, okay, the report style controls how those quantities are listed out. So I'm going to click on the material definitions, and I'm going to, for the standard detailed, configure the materials that go with that. When I select the material configuration, this is the listing for all of the formulas that come shipped with SoftPlan. And so if I scroll that all the way down, give or take, there's 500 formulas that are there. And those formulas you can then modify, okay, and add to and change costings and so on associated. And I'll run through some of the key categories that you will need to know. All right. Under the name is the listing of how you want it to show on a given report. Okay, that's completely up to you. All right. What SoftPlan or SoftList is looking for, all right, is actually the sequence number. And the sequence number is how the report finds and determines where items are going to be listed. So, for example, all concrete material, you'll see as I'm looking at it, okay, so concrete footing and concrete wall are going to be listed in that 2100 to probably 2200 range. So any formulas that have that sequence number between, those two values, it's going to list there. To take this to another level and to go back to our question about how do I get this from SoftPlan to, say, QuickBooks or any other accounting package, you would need to go in to SoftList and assign an order number to it. So the concrete footing may be listed as sequence number 2100 in SoftPlan, but the order number, in order to align it with your QuickBooks, okay, you would need to come in and simply type in whatever number needs to be assigned in the order number to match. Once you have done that, you will then be able to import and export between the two accounting packages, SoftList and the third-party package, and have them align because they'll recognize each other by the order number. So that's where it comes into. And the order part, accounting, and item number basically are all just different subdivisions of being able to recognize each of the items in SoftList. Now, moving left to right, okay, you will have the ability to go in and modify multiple costs, and then as we talked about, you'll have the labor, markup, and waste that can all be set up there. Okay, you can certainly control what is shown. We won't have time to do it today, but you can generate a report that simply lists out cost and final totals while calculating in things like labor and markup, but you don't necessarily want that being generated to the final report, if that makes sense. Okay? So I want to take you in the final couple of minutes and just show you a standard formula in what it may look like, so you can kind of get a feel for it, if you try to go in and do any editing. So I'm going to, with the concrete footing, it's the first one in the list, with it highlighted, I'd like to come in and just do an edit on this, and I'll say yes to saving that change. When you edit the actual formula itself, it's going to pop up this dialog right here. Now, every formula is assigned to a type of group. So in this case, the footing is assigned to the group wall as opposed to roof or some other, setting within the program. Okay? Once you have a material, assigned, it's going to give you access to what variables are going to be accessible to that formula. So the variables of length, footing, depth, and width, for example, okay, are associated with the group wall. And if this were associated to the group roof, it would have variables that, such as overhang and, pitch of roof and so on. Okay, so that's what that's going to do there. Quantities are calculated, okay, based on the group that's there. So in this case right now, I have it set to include, and then the units are set up by me, okay, at cubic yards, okay, and once I have done that, the calculation is going to take place down here where it takes the length times the footing depth, okay, times the footing width, and it divides the entire number by 27 in order to convert this to cubic yards, okay? So that's how the formula in a simplistic way is being done. Okay, when it lists its final value in cubic yards to the generator report, it's going to, in the description field, list me the footing depth and the footing width. All accounting is taken here, and so in this case, we have an accounting cost of $88.40 per cubic yard is how this is going to be calculated. And so if I were to go back to my generated report for a second, okay, we can see at this stage that there's the name controlled by me. There's the description, again, from the variables that were there, and then we get, the quantity, the units, and the total cost. Now, in this case, on the footing, if I were going to do this, let's say, listing lineal footage, just to show you a simple change that you could do, on this calculation, all right? I'm going to come in and I'm going to edit material. Okay. Now, ordinarily, I would probably go in and do a copy of this formula and have it listed there, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to edit the original formula and regenerate the report. And so what I'm going to do in this case is, instead of my concrete footing calculating out cubic yards, I will simply change this units to feet. This didn't change anything about the formula, just simply what the units are going to be, used out, when it's calculated. As I move down to the, kind of like it's almost like we're filtering out information, how we want this calculated. We're only going to count walls that are load-bearing, and we'll use basically the center line of the wall, okay, for our calculation, and we're only going to calculate walls that have a footing. That makes sense, okay? So that's, just basically, we've just filtered out all interior walls. We've filtered out non-bearing walls, but just by making these selections. And these are just drop-downs. You just pick what it is that you want to, associate or how you want to do the calculation. Okay? As I move into the calculate quantity, we've determined we want to calculate the length of this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to remove the variables that are there and set this to none, because that's really what I'm attempting to do is just calculate the lineal length of the footer. And so when I'm doing that and I want to list it in just feet, I'll remove the coverage factor. It's no longer needed. And we'll just set this to 0 decimal places. So we're basically calculating the lineal length of this in feet now. We'll still list in the calculation method, okay, depth and width, just so we know what that is, and it will also help us to differentiate between different size footers. We will click on the accounting field, and in this case now, we're obviously not charging, almost $90 a lineal foot to put a footer in. So we're going to set that calculation up, and we'll type in, let's say, for today, $3 per lineal foot to put the footer in, and just to give us something as far as a calculation is concerned. Okay, so I'm looking now when I run the report, and I'll click OK to this and click OK and say yes to saving the changes. I'm looking that this will no longer list 10.4 cubic yards, but rather lineal footage of what our footers are. And so I'll say yes to discarding the report, and we will run a new report to see what comes up for the listing of concrete footings. And these are today, of course, is just to familiarize yourself with the generated reports, how they're done, show you a couple of simple changes that you could do, okay, on a given report. All right, and so now as I come into the concrete footing, once again, it's now listing I need 140 lineal feet at $3 per lineal foot and gives me my cost. Okay, and so as I come in and I were to highlight these entities, it's going to go back to my model just to see where I got this calculation from. And as I take a look at it in the foundation plan, there's where the footers are being calculated. There's nothing highlighted in the other two plans because it does not, apply to that. Okay? I'm going to take you through one last, change that you can do within SoftList to bring our time to a close. Okay, and that is when I'm taking a look at the main floor plan, and I'm going to change modes into area. What you will see right now is I have a gross floor area, okay, of give or take, about 540 square feet. All right, and we have a formula in there that's using this to calculate these the square footage. So if I come into my material list, SoftList Configuration, okay, and I'm going to go into my standard detailed, and I'm just going to do a find on labor. It takes me down to the framing labor formula, okay, and I'm just going to expand this to the full size of the screen. And so when I click on the framing labor, and I'm just going to double click, or I could have selected edit, what you will see right now is the material setup group area shows framing labor is going to look at gross floor area, okay, and it's going to basically just calculate that out. And under accounting, it's now going to list for me, that we're basically charging $7.55, per square foot for that. Now what I'd like to do is the garage was not calculated in there, and so I would like to come in and have a secondary formula that calculates this, okay, for that area there, just so we get that area calculation out, okay, and we'll have that list to the report as being unheated, okay, as kind of the unheated area, and for today's purposes, we're just going to use the exact same sequence number of 3150 so that it lists in the same spot. Okay, it'll make it easier for us to find, a little bit later. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this first, and I'm going to show you how you put an area in. We're going to actually rename that area first to unheated, put the area in, write a formula, and generate a report to bring it to a close. And so we'll just be, probably the whole thing will take about 5 more minutes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in through File and System Options, okay? And when I come into System Options, this gives me my opportunity of where I can go in and configure things. And I'm going to select that I want to go to Finish Options, and Area Options is what I wish to change. And so in this case here, I'll click on Area Number 2, and I'm going to just change the name of this to Unheated. And it will reference to the exterior edge of the wall. I'll press OK on that and say yes to saving the changes. Now, when I come to draw and I'm going to select area number 2, you can see the tooltip drops down from the ribbon bar, says unheated, and I will press this and select manual trace. And I'm just going to sketch in this area where I would like it to go. And so when I do that, it snaps in there, and if I were to edit this area, it's going to show me, that the, 214 square feet, etc. So I would like to now come in and write a formula that pertains, to calculating that out on our given report. I'm going to select Model, Material List, SoftList Configuration, okay. We will click on the standard detailed is what we're looking to actually, modify on this, and just configure the materials. Again, I'll do a search for the labor, and it, takes me down. I'm just going to scroll this a little bit. So there's my framing labor. For today's purposes, I'm going to simply copy that formula, so I have 2 of them now. And I'm going to edit this second one. And when I do that, I can now change the name, and we're just going to say unheated area, okay? And so that's what our basic formula is going to be. Now, we're going to include it. The unit's going to remain in square foot. But this time, I'm going to remove the checkbox off of the area type, and I'm going to, enable the unheated area for the given report. How the quantity is being calculated is the same, and this was simply a copy of the list of variables that are associated with the group area. So whether I'm listing square footage or if I were needing to calculate the perimeter of something, I could insert that instead. Okay, but in this case, this will suffice. When I go to the accounting field, as I said, we're going to keep the sequence number the same for today, okay, because I'm not going to analyze the report and where that's going to list, but I could certainly go into the review, and this would give me the listing of the reports down there, so I can see that, the 3150 is under framing labor. So, we've got roofing labor, falling between these numbers here, concrete falling between these numbers, and so on. In my case, I'm just going to, drop it into the exact same spot on the report. And in the case of the labor, I'm just going to set this to 0. I just simply want to know what the square footage is for that unheated area within the house. And so once I've done that and I've pressed OK, and click OK here, I will generate my report. All right, and so I will click OK on this, and we're just going to yes to saving that change and run the standard detailed. And so the report is now going through at this stage and regenerating based on the building model. We have a new form. We actually have two new formulas in there, one that lists footers by lineal foot and one that's now going to list the unheated area and will list in the framing area at this stage for our formula. Again, I'm just answering no to the set value prompts that are coming up so that we can get to the end of the report. All right, and as I scroll this down now, I can see framing labor is there, and my new unheated area, okay, which was 214 point something, has been rounded to 215 square feet, and is now being calculated out on the report.